This meeting is being recorded.
All right, welcome to our Thursday night New York Giants Preservation Society meeting. Welcome, everybody. Tonight we have Tom Flynn. Tom is the great nephew of Tom Sheehan, a longtime member of the Giants franchise, both in New York and in San Francisco. A couple of things going on. Next week we have Curt Smith. Curt is the leading authority on baseball announcers, and I'm sure he's going to be doing the San Francisco portion of the announcers. Last time he did in New York, so he'll talk about everyone from 1958 until present day today. So we look forward to that, and he will also surely be speaking of Vince Scully, who passed. I mentioned that the Giants did a wonderful job last night at their stadium with a ceremony dedicated to the memory of Vince Scully. Many of you I've spoken to about Cooperstown for next year. If anybody who I've not spoken to, any interest in attending next year's induction, you can email me. The reason why I'm considering going is because it looks like Bruce Bochy will be on the ballot, and I am sure he's going to be enshrined. And if that happens, I'm sure next summer, Norm will also be attending I would think the Giants would retire his jersey as well. So unless you guys don't feel that way, but I think if he's inducted into the Hall, his number will be retired by the Giants as well. So we have Curt Smith, next week. And then the next 2 weeks I have left open. My daughter is expecting a child, and I can get somebody, and I will, providing I know when this baby is coming. So I think after next week, we'll have another meeting in August. That's all I'll say. I don't know the exact date of that. And then I have 3 or 4 already scheduled for September. Before we get started, I don't know if any of you know, Judge Jim Mully is here. Jim is now the 14th coach that the Giants have hired. He is the IQ coach. He'll be working with some of these players who just don't know how to play baseball. So Jim, welcome aboard. Do a good job. Sorry they can't fit you in a good mood. Not in a good mood. Sorry they can't fit you in the dugout. There's just no space. There's too many coaches.
Jim, can you hear me, Jim?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Tell him about the November case that I.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later, Frank. I want to get Tom started, okay? It is my distinct pleasure to welcome Tom Flynn in. Tom has been a part of this group, and he is again the great nephew of Tom Sheehan. He's going to do a slideshow and some pictures and stuff. So whenever he's ready, he will tell me, and I will turn the screen over to him. But let's all welcome Tom Flynn to the New York Giants Preservation Society.
Welcome, Tom.
Thanks so much, everybody. It's great to be with you. I'm excited to share my research. And Gary, I'm ready at any time.
Okay, security, share screen. Tom, you should be able to take it away from there.
It's making me
Yeah, I gave you the screen. I don't know how to do it from your end, but you have control.
Okay. Oh, I see. Sorry, it's making me clear a privacy thing. All right.
Settings.
Gary, I'm sorry. It's making me do a privacy thing and I have to relaunch Chrome to do it.
Okay, it's no problem.
So I'll be right back.
You got it. After Tom is done, by the way, I'm sure many of you want to hang around and have your bitchathon, as they call it. So we will leave the room open. Can't believe what I'm watching. God, it's
Plenty to
incredible.
complain about now.
Why, Gary? Is there something wrong with the Giants this week? Gee whiz, I can't imagine that.
By the way, Rick Swig, TV star here back in New York.
Yeah.
He's on more than I Love Lucy lately.
Yeah.
In fact, I called Rick today to tell him that NBC's Bay Area has a bad feed and he should talk to them because he's never on when I'm watching, only on ESPN and MLB Network and TBS.
Yeah, that's because Norm, my agent, hasn't done a deal with them yet. That's the issue. You know.
So we had to deal with the MLB network and they were showing the local broadcast. So he really was on both.
Okay, there we go.
And by the way, I heard Mike Kruko had a good comment today. He said Junior Marte has been very consistent. Then I looked at his ERA; it was 5.46. I don't know what he's talking about. Consistently bad? I mean, come on.
I think that's what they referred to as a homer. As a homer. Yes.
Holy cow! Tom, you want to try this again?
Yep.
All right.
Not sure what's going on here. Oh, I know.
Okay, now you're in.
Okay.
So sorry about this delay, guys.
No problem.
Okay, I think we're good. Now it says disabled share. Is it still?
Okay.
Can you see if I'm still?
Now you should. I gave you back the share screen.
Got it. For some reason, it's not. There we go. Shoot. All right, I'm just going to share my entire screen. That's the only way I'm going to be able to do it.
There you go. Hey, Joe, how are you? There we go.
Good, how are you?
All right, everybody see that?
Yep.
Looks great.
Okay, good. All right, again, thank you so much for having me, Gary, and everybody for showing up to hear about Tom Sheehan. I've got about 80 years to stuff into a 35-minute bag, so bear with me. I might move a little quickly. I began researching the life and career of Tom Sheehan in 2002 or so because I'm a baseball fan and I was curious to learn more about the man whose name I share. He moved away from his hometown, where most of our family still live, at age 19, so the details of his life story and career weren't well known, even in the family. He visited his family occasionally during his lifetime, but only briefly. I met Uncle Tom just once that I recall at a family reunion when I was too young to have a meaningful conversation with him. I've spent 20 years searching microfilm and digitized newspapers and talking to players and the relatives who knew him to learn as much of his life story as possible. The core of tonight's presentation will focus on Tom Sheehan's career with the Giants, but I'll also run through his years as a player, coach, and minor league manager prior to his tenure with the Giants. Let's begin with the event for which he's most well known. On June 18th, 1960, Tom Sheehan became interim manager of the San Francisco Giants, replacing Bill Rigney. I'll get into the details of that decision later, but first some background. Bill Rigney became Giants manager in 1956, 2 seasons after the club won the World Series. In his first 2 seasons as manager, the Giants finished in 6th place. In 1958, their first season in San Francisco, they finished in 3rd. In 1959, with the exception of one day, The Giants held the top spot in the National League from the 4th of July until September 19th, when the Dodgers swept them in a doubleheader at San Francisco. The Giants fell into third place that day, and that's where they'd finish after losing 7 of their final 8
What happened?
games.
We're on auto bill. Let me explain what happened. I see the problem.
During the offseason, Rigney was given a 1-year
Oh, I
contract.
was inquiring about the guy. You had already.
Tom, wait a second, Tom. I can't see everybody, and who's ever entering the room is being totally rude. Please turn off your microphone. Tom, I apologize.
No problem. So as I was saying, in 1959, with the exception of one day, the Giants held the top spot in the National League from the 4th of July until September 19th, when the Dodgers swept them in a doubleheader at San Francisco. The Giants fell into third place that day, and that's where they'd finish after losing 7 of their final 8 games. During the offseason, Rigney was given a 1-year contract for 1960 and a win or else mandate from the ownership. With 1958 and 59 Rookies of the Year, Orlando Cepeda and Willie McCovey, and the best player in baseball, Willie Mays, the Giants had an excellent core. Their already strong pitching staff was augmented in the offseason with the acquisition of pitchers Billy Lose and Billy Odell from the Orioles. The mood was optimistic, even confident, as the Giants began spring training. The 1960 season was extremely important for owner Horace Stoneham and the Giants. It was the year the Giants moved out of Seals Stadium, a minor league ballpark, and into Candlestick Park, a $15 million stadium with plenty of parking and open views to the Pacific Ocean. But Candlestick Park's opening was a disaster. Nobody liked it. The fans and umpires, the Giants and their opponents all griped about its flaws from the get-go. It was too windy during the day, too cold at night. It robbed the Giants of home runs and turned fly balls into fraught adventures. The batter's eye was terrible, and the walls between the dugouts glared in sunlight. An unpleasant odor wafted in from nearby landfill. The radiant heating system's pipes were installed too deeply in the concrete under the seats and didn't work. Fans were forced to walk uphill to enter the ballpark, a traverse quickly nicknamed Cardiac Hill. It was no joke. By the end of May, there were 15 cardiac events at Candlestick Park. Instead of a season-long celebration, the Giants faced a long list of maintenance issues and public relations headaches. The Giants began their third homestand of 1960 on May 30th in second place, a half game behind the Pirates. The Giants treaded water for 2 weeks, winning 7 of the first 15 games of the homestand. When Pittsburgh arrived for a 3-game set beginning June 14th, their lead was 1 game. But after sweeping 3 games from the Giants, it grew to 4. It was deja vu all over again. The 1959 collapse was still a recent memory, and once again, the Giants failed to reclaim the league lead. Several newspapers reported on the morning of June 17th that fans were upset and wanted Rigney fired. The San Francisco News-Call Bulletin reported that Rigney's firing was imminent. Horace Stoneham, reached in Phoenix, where he was finalizing a new spring training ballpark, said he couldn't confirm or deny the rumors. Giants Vice President Chub Feeney, Stoneham's nephew, said there would be a definitive answer on the 18th. Stoneham flew back to San Francisco on the evening of the 17th. Stoneham, Feeney, and scouting director Carl Hubble met that night during the first game of a 3-game series against the Phillies and decided it was time to fire Rigney. On the morning of June 18th, Giants head scout and troubleshooter Tom Sheehan arrived at Candlestick about 90 minutes before the second Phillies game, scheduled to start at 12:55. He was called into Stoneham's office. According to Sheehan, after discussing possible replacements for Rigney, Stoneham said, "Why don't you take it? Try it for a while." Sheehan said, "Stoneham looked right at me. I almost backed away, but couldn't do anything about it. I was as surprised as anybody, but pleased with the compliment." In hindsight, it seems possible the Phillies denied a Giants attempt to acquire Alvin Dark, who was in the Phillies lineup that night. He was traded to Milwaukee 6 days later. At any rate, Sheehan accepted Stoneham's offer, and Feeney was sent to the field to relieve Rigney of his managerial duties during batting practice. As they posed for this awkward photo, Sheehan said to Rigney, I don't feel good about this. All I know is I wish you the best. This happens to everybody. We'll be friends. We only have a short time left. Rigney then went upstairs to watch the game from the team suite. For what it's worth, the two did remain on friendly terms, and Rigney even visited with Sheehan in the dugout prior to a game in July. The Giants were so unprepared for the sudden change in managers, they didn't have a uniform on hand for the new skipper. The 66-year-old Sheehan traded his sport coat for a Giants satin jacket and cap and took his place in the dugout, the oldest rookie manager in Major League history at that point. 2 days later, he was issued Hank Sauer's old uniforms, number 6. Press and fan reaction to the managerial change was swift and harsh. The anger wasn't directed so much at replacing Rigney, but at the choice of replacement. Former Giants manager Leo DeRocher and local legend Lefty O'Doul were the popular choices to take over. Some sports writers claim that Sheehan was given the job solely because he was Stoneham's drinking buddy. He was roundly mocked for his age, size, and resume. The Giants won the first game under Sheehan and then lost the next 5. The vitriol increased with each loss. Sheehan was even hung in effigy after the 4th loss of his tenure. You can see that in the picture on the left. A week after Sheehan took over, New York Daily News columnist Dick Young, a lifelong Giants fan, went so far as to accuse Sheehan of orchestrating the firing of both Rigney and DeRocher. Referring to Sheehan as, quote, an engaging windbag and the greatest second guesser in the game, end quote, Young theorized without evidence or sources that Sheehan led DeRocher and Rigney to the guillotine. Sheehan shot back, I guess New York sports writers are still sore because the Giants moved out on them. I've been in this game 48 years and nobody can ever say I knifed anyone or did anything wrong. Some West Coast writers eagerly borrowed the engaging windbag descriptor, and Sheehan was routinely described as fat and unqualified. In fact, Sheehan's resume and qualifications have been inaccurately reported in articles and books for decades, and as recently as last year. So, who was Tom Sheehan and what were his qualifications? What events led him to managing the 1960 Giants? These are the questions I hope my presentation helps to answer tonight. Thomas Clancy Sheehan was born on March 31st, 1894, the youngest of 6 children, 2 boys, 4 girls, born to second-generation Irish Americans who farmed near Grand Ridge, Illinois, in an area known as the Bottoms near the Vermilion River. You can see in the lower left where the approximate location of the family farm was. And on the right, there's a blue dot where Grand Ridge is. And the inset map just shows you how far Grand Ridge is from Chicago. It's about 80 miles southwest, right off of Interstate 80 today. Sheehan grew up with baseball. As a child, one of Tom's neighbors was Vinegar Bill Essick. 14 years older than Sheehan, Essick was a journeyman pitcher who managed the Vernon Tigers when his playing days ended. Eventually, Essick became a scout for the Yankees, signing Joe DiMaggio, Ralph Houck, and several other impact players. Tom Sheehan's brother, Jerry, 11 years his senior, was also a good athlete. The 2-sport star at the University of Notre Dame, Jerry was a football lineman and a catcher. After graduating, he went on to play for 10 minor league baseball teams during his 6-year career. Jerry's last stop in pro ball was in 1912 with the Streeter Speed Boys, a Class D club that played 9 miles south of the Sheehan farm. The following season, 19-year-old Tom signed with Streeter as a pitcher and outfielder. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall and farm boy strong, already known in the area for his blazing fastball and hitting ability. Tom tried out for the Western League Des Moines Boosters in 1914. Initially, he made the team, but was sold to the Dubuque Dubs of the 3I League a week into the season without having appeared in any games. He was cut by Dubuque a week later, again without seeing any action. So he traveled to Albert Lee, Minnesota, and pitched for their renowned semi-pro team. There, he compiled a 24-6 record in the MI League. During the winter of 1914 and 15, Sheehan moved to Peoria, where his brother Jerry was living. He tried out for the Distillers of the 3I League. Nearly cut, he impressed manager Izzy Hoffman in a last chance appearance and made the team. The Distillers were in a financial hole that season, needing to raise approximately $2,000 by July 17th to stay out of receivership. Hoffman was a former scout for the Philadelphia Athletics and had discovered Eddie Collins and Home Run Baker. He contacted Connie Mack and offered Sheehan sight unseen for $1,000. Mack agreed to take on Sheehan on a trial basis. After traveling with the Athletics for a week, Sheehan made his debut in a relief at Comiskey Park on July 15, 1915. He held the first place White Sox scoreless in 3 innings pitched. Mack sent the Distillers $1,000 cash and outfielder John Cahill to close the deal. That money, combined with donations from fans, kept the Distillers in business. Sheehan was one of 27 pitchers to appear for the Athletics in 1915. They finished the season with 43 wins, 109 losses, and 2 ties. The 1916 A's were even worse. Forever known as the Pathetics, they scored just 447 runs in 152 games and finished 36-117. Sheehan's 1-16 record wasn't even the worst on the staff. His roommate Jack Neighbors went 1-20. Prior to the 1917 season, Mack sold Sheehan to the Atlanta Crackers of the Southern Association, reneging on a promise to bring him back to the A's. Sheehan pitched well in Atlanta, and the fans took to calling him Long Tom. The Crackers were in the heat of the pennant race when Sheehan's number was called in the first military draft lottery for World War I. Around this same time, Sheehan injured his arm while wrestling with teammate Rube Bressler. He heard something snap, and suddenly his trademark fastball was gone. Unable to throw a ball 60 feet, Sheehan was shut down for the rest of the season and watched the Crackers win the pennant from the bench. The day after the season ended, he boarded a train to Fort Dodge near Des Moines, Iowa. Sheehan feared the worst for his arm, telling friends in letters from Camp Dodge that his pitching days were over. By spring of 1918, however, the arm healed enough that he joined his unit's baseball team. Like Sheehan, most of the soldiers on the team had professional experience. Still without his old fastball, Sheehan reinvented himself as a control pitcher and led the team to the camp title, as well as to wins against the Western League's Omaha Rourkes and the American Association Minneapolis Millers. His deployment to France was delayed for several months due to a bout with the measles. Hostilities ended less than 3 months after his arrival in Europe, but his unit remained to assist with the peacetime transition. Sheehan and company played a lot of baseball and football during that time. In one football game, he lined up as an end for a team whose quarterback was Charlie Dressen. The two would cross paths several more times in the next 40 plus years, and they became lifelong friends. Sheehan rejoined the 5th place Crackers on June 21st, 1919. They won 61 of 87 games following his return and won the pennant. Sheehan's 1.68 ERA was the best in the league. Connie Mack selected Sheehan to rejoin the A's for the 1920 season, but Tom refused. Instead, he went home and said he'd quit baseball before reporting to Mack. He said Mack never treated or paid him like a big leaguer, and he requested his rights be transferred to Pat Moran's Cincinnati Reds instead. With no leverage, he re-signed with Atlanta for 1920. He tossed 2 no-hitters in 1920, but his greatest feat that season was pitching both ends of a doubleheader. He won the first, but the second game ended in a tie when it was called due to darkness after 15 innings, an incredible 24 innings pitched in one day. On the day he won his 29th decision of 1920, it was reported the Yankees had acquired his rights for 1921. Sheehan had a dead arm for most of spring training with the Yankees, but made the 1921 opening day squad. He roomed with Babe Ruth. They remained friends and golfed together several times in subsequent years. Sheehan started one game for the Yankees and pitched just 33 innings in 12 appearances. At the end of July, he was sent to the American Association's St. Paul Saints with Tim Hendricks and cash for outfielder Elmer Miller. In St. Paul, Sheehan reconnected with Charlie Dressen, now a promising second baseman for the Saints. After the season, Sheehan joined his former Yankees teammates Ruth, Bob Musial, and Bill Piercy for a barnstorming tour in defiance of Commissioner Kennesaw Landis. The tour was canceled after 1 week due to bad weather, small crowds, and escalating threats of punishment from the commissioner's office. Unlike his former teammates, Sheehan received no punishment due to his minor league status. In 1922, he led the American Association in wins and innings pitched. The Saints won the pennant, but lost the Junior World Series to Baltimore. In 1923, Sheehan had a season for the ages. His 31 wins tied the all-time American Association record. More remarkably, he pitched the final 2 months of the season on a fractured ankle with a floating bone fragment. Sheehan's 5-year-old wish came true when Pat Moran's Cincinnati Reds acquired him for the 1924 season. En route to spring training from his home in Los Angeles, Sheehan discovered he was on the wrong train near Jacksonville, Florida, and jumped to a freight train going in the right direction to Orlando. He arrived in time for the Reds' first workouts, but manager Pat Moran was too ill to lead them. Moran died 3 days later from Bright's disease, a kidney ailment. Sheehan mostly pitched in relief in 1924 and put together the best major league season of his career. In 1925, the Reds signed Sheehan's old pal Dressen. Their reunion was short-lived, however, as Sheehan, again bothered by arm trouble, was traded to the Pirates on May 29th for first baseman Al Niehaus. After recovering from his arm injury, Sheehan suffered an oblique strain. He returned to action at the end of July as a short relief specialist for Pittsburgh. He was on the mound when the Pirates clinched the National League pennant, but didn't appear in any World Series games. Sheehan was sold to the Kansas City Blues of the American Association after an 0-2 start in 9 appearances with the 26 Pirates. The Blues paid the Pirates $7,500 for Sheehan, 50% more than the established high-end rate for top minor league talent of the era. But 1926 was a disappointing season for Sheehan. But he did win over the Kansas City fans and his teammates with his humor and work ethic. In 1927, he became the staff ace. Manager Dutch Zwilling treated the 33-year-old Sheehan like a player coach. He led the league with 26 wins and 331 innings pitched. In 1928, Sheehan's coaching duties expanded. He went on multiple scouting trips between starts and served as manager when Zwilling was out with illness. In 1929, the Blues won the American Association. Sheehan again served as player coach and fill-in manager. His teammates and sports writers took to calling him by his middle name, Clancy, a moniker that stuck for the rest of his life. In 1930, the 36-year-old Sheehan struggled again. His time in Kansas City ended in 1931 when he was released unconditionally on June 1st to allow him the chance to choose his next team. He received many offers, but accepted one from the Minneapolis Millers, now owned by Mike Kelly, who had been his boss in St. Paul from 1921 to 23. His old friend Charlie Dressen was also with the Millers in 1931. After 3 months of pitching, coaching, and occasionally filling in as manager, Sheehan was loaned to the Baltimore Orioles along with Dressen for the final weeks of the season, as the O's unsuccessfully fought for the International League pennant. Kelly granted Sheehan his unconditional release in October, allowing the 37-year-old a chance to sign with a West Coast team close to his Los Angeles home. Sheehan signed with the Pacific Coast League's Hollywood Stars for 1932. In an injury-marred season, the 38-year-old Sheehan excelled. 7 of his 13 wins were shutouts. In 1933, despite suffering more injuries and coping with the tragic mid-season death of his wife, Ollie, Sheehan went 21-13. In 1934, at age 40, Sheehan pitched his final season. Here's a look at his composite stats as a pitcher. Unfortunately, his career ERA is incalculable due to missing statistical data from several minor league seasons. Cincinnati Reds manager Charlie Dressen, if you can believe it, hired Sheehan and George High Pants Kelly as coaches in 1935. That picture in the center of the slide shows those three and the difference in their height. Counting their football exploits in France, this was the sixth and final time Sheehan and Dressen were members of the same team. The coaching staff remained intact through 1937, while the Reds finished in 6th, 5th, and 8th place. In Cincinnati, Sheehan took part in several historic occasions or events. He was part of the first ever big league night game, the first ever big league team flight, and the first ever big league spring training held in Puerto Rico. In 1936, Sheehan also scouted for the Reds and was even added to the active roster as a relief pitcher in September, though he never appeared in a game. At the time, he was 42 years old. He was fired along with Dressen and Kelly after the 37 season. Former Cincinnati GM Larry McPhail hired Sheehan to scout for the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1938. In May, Sheehan swapped jobs with coach Andy High and joined manager Burley Grimes' staff. Sheehan's old roommate Babe Ruth was added to the coaching staff 3 weeks later. Sheehan managed his first major league game on August 9th when Grimes was suspended. The Dodgers beat the Phillies 9-6. After the Dodgers finished in 7th place, Grimes was fired. It was reported that McPhail wanted Sheehan to take over as Dodgers manager, but Mike Kelly called first, and he was hired to manage the Minneapolis Millers. A 1943 article claimed Sheehan missed becoming the 1939 Dodgers manager by 15 minutes. Widely considered one of the smartest and most likable men in baseball, Sheehan was courted by a number of major league clubs for managerial openings, among them the Cubs, Senators, Red Sox, Browns, and Phillies. He also passed on a coaching position with the Giants while he was managing in Minneapolis. Asked about becoming a major league manager, Sheehan said, "I have pitched, coached, and scouted for major league clubs, and returning to the big time doesn't have much appeal to me. There are several clubs in the big leagues that I wouldn't manage for 3 times the salary Kelly is paying me. These clubs are owned by businessmen who are totally ignorant of the playing end of the game. All they know is gate receipts, overhead, and that sort of thing. There are many things in baseball these businessmen owners do not understand. The final score is the whole story for them. I wouldn't stand for any office efficiency experts telling me how to handle players and run a team on the infield, which happens to be true of several major league managers I know." When Dodgers manager Leo DeRocher and McPhail were openly feuding in Brooklyn, rumors circulated that McPhail was still pursuing Sheehan, whom he had once called the best judge of baseball talent in the country. Sheehan insisted he was still happy in Minneapolis. Sheehan finally stepped down in 1943 following his 5th season as Miller's manager, saying he had learned to know when it was time to go. Boston Braves manager Bob Coleman hired Sheehan as pitching coach and third base coach for his 1944 club. The highlight of the season was Jim Tobin's no-hitter on April 27th. The Braves finished 65-89 in 6th place. Sheehan was asked to return for 1945, but he declined. Sheehan remained a free agent throughout the offseason. At age 51 and out of baseball for the first time in his adult life, Sheehan found work as a house detective for the Stevens Hotel in Chicago. One night in October of 1945, while the Cubs hosted the Tigers in the World Series across town, Sheehan was asked to investigate a raucous gathering in one of the hotel suites. When the door opened, he saw a room full of baseball men, many of whom he counted as friends. New York Giants owner Horace Stoneham shouted, "Tom, come in and have a drink." Sheehan obliged. He left the suite that night with an offer to join the New York Giants organization in 1946. The plan was to have Sheehan work as a spring training instructor before hitting the road as a scout, but a crisis arose in Minneapolis. The Giants had purchased the minor league Millers less than a week before the club's opening day. Their new manager, Zeke Benura, was facing a rebellion. Mike Kelly had hired Benura to manage and reassigned manager Rosie Ryan to the front office as business manager shortly before the Giants bought the Millers. Stoneham traveled to Minneapolis to sort things out. He discovered that Benura had already lost the confidence of the players and front office. Stoneham fired the rookie manager and replaced him with Ryan. 2 days later, Stoneham moved Ryan back to the business manager slot and named Sheehan the third Millers manager in 4 days. Sports writer Hugh Fullerton summed it up neatly. Quote, "The current manager of the Minneapolis Millers is Tom Sheehan, who succeeded Rosie Ryan, who succeeded Zeke Benura, who succeeded Rosie Ryan, who succeeded Tom Sheehan in 1944, end quote. Sheehan managed the Millers for 1946 and 47. In all, during his 7 years as Minneapolis Millers, the club reached postseason 4 times. Prior to the 1948 season, Stoneham announced that Sheehan would serve as an advanced scout for the Giants, a new baseball position that previously existed only in the Dodgers organization. In 1949, Sheehan's role evolved and expanded. He began scouting in Latin America, and in Puerto Rico, he signed pitcher Ruben Gomez. By 1950, Sheehan was scouting, evaluating Giants prospects, and assisting rookies with their transition to the big leagues. Many years later, Willie Mays told Bob Nagel, Sheehan's grandnephew, "Sheehan was one of the greatest men I ever knew," and explained that the two had even been neighbors. Furthermore, several years after Mays received his first big league contract, Sheehan handed him a bank passbook for an interest-bearing account that Sheehan had established in Mays' name without the young superstar's knowledge. The account had grown to $9,000. In early August 1951, the Giants trailed the Dressen-managed Dodgers by 13.5 games. It was reported that Sheehan would help Brooklyn scout potential World Series opponents as soon as the Giants were eliminated. Thanks to Bobby Thompson's shot heard round the world, Sheehan's scouting reports remained in-house for the 51 series. Giants manager Leo DeRocher said of Sheehan's intel, which was co-authored with Brooklyn's Andy High, quote, "The finest I had ever seen. The reports had everything. They told what each Yankee did, how he acted in certain circumstances, just what you could expect from him," end quote. Sheehan returned the favor, assisting the Dodgers in 1952 as they prepared to face the Yankees in the World Series. By 1953, Sheehan was referred to as Giants' chief scout and troubleshooter, and Stoneham called him his, quote, "court of last resort when an important decision has to be made," end quote. After another trip to Puerto Rico during the winter of 1953 and 54, Sheehan advised Stoneham to close a deal with the Braves, who had offered pitcher Johnny Antonelli for Bobby Thompson. He mentioned a Braves prospect he had watched in Puerto Rico named Henry Aaron and warned, "If the Braves find out that Aaron is ready right now, they'll forget all about Thompson." Stoneham made the trade. In June of 1954, the Kansas City Blues inducted Sheehan into their Hall of Fame. The Kansas City Star noted that Sheehan probably ranks as the greatest pitcher in the history of the American Association, having led the circuit in innings pitched twice and wins 3 times. He was praised as one of the 2 smartest pitchers the league ever produced. Sheehan developed a close working relationship with Pedro Zarilla, the most well-connected talent broker in Latin America. The connection was instrumental in the Giants' acquisition of several ball players, most notably Orlando Cepeda, Juan Marichal, Ruben Gomez, Jose Pagan, and the Alou brothers. In a Look magazine profile of Cepeda, writer Tim Cohane described the importance of Sheehan's role. Quote, "When Cepeda first came up, his counselor was Tom Sheehan. This veteran scout and troubleshooter is known as the Great White Father of the Caribbean because of the many players he discovered in that area," end quote. In 1958, Sheehan signed a high school pitcher named Gaylord Perry. In Sheehan's role as Giants head scout, He wasn't often the scout of record for signed prospects. He is credited with just 9. Dusty Rhodes, Pete Burnside, Ruben Gomez, Ramon Condi, Mike McCormick, Gaylord Perry, Dick Dietz, Cap Peterson, and Bob Garibaldi, though he had involvement and final say with many more. Now we're back to 1960. Earlier, you'll recall, I mentioned the fierce backlash against Sheehan from fans and sports writers. But Sheehan faced more pressing issues on the field. With notable exceptions, Cepeda and Mays, the Giants scuffled and underperformed. Notably, 1959 Rookie of the Year Willie McCovey was mired in a sophomore slump. Prior to his dismissal, Rigney had insisted on sticking with McCovey at first base, which forced Cepeda to play right field. That kept Felipe Alou on the bench. Frustrated with Rigney's lack of confidence in him, Alou was on the verge of quitting baseball to pursue a teaching career in the Dominican Republic when Sheehan took over. In a 2018 interview with me, Alou said Sheehan was, quote, the one person who gave me an opportunity to be an everyday player in the big leagues, end quote. More off-field problems surfaced in early July when Sheehan instituted a curfew, ostensibly because players had been playing poker late into the night. It was later reported by Hank Hollingsworth that a few named players were flaunting team rules, including a player who strolled into the team hotel more than once at 10 a.m. after being out all night. Sports Illustrated's Robert H. Boyle later outed McCovey as the offender. After the Giants fell into 5th place in early July, Sheehan promoted Juan Marichal from Tacoma on July 10th. He demoted McCovey to Tacoma on the 17th. Marichal became the club's ace, sparking a 5-game winning streak to close out July, but the Giants remained in 5th place. After McCovey returned from his 2-week demotion, the Giants lost 12 of their next 14 and dropped to 14.5 games behind the league-leading Pirates. By the end of August, Sheehan had lost control of the club. Dale Long, traded from the Giants to the Yankees, said of his former club, quote, it's a terrible situation. They have so much good pitching. They should win so much more than they do. Asked to share his thoughts on Sheehan, Long said, quote, the players run all over him. He was too close to most of them. He knew them as kids, signed them, loved them, and they took advantage, end quote. In late September, Sheehan was asked why the team he had picked in the spring to win the pennant finished in 5th place. He said, quote, we're last in fielding, last in double plays, and 5th in hitting. How can a club like that win? My first baseman didn't hit for me. My right fielder, he went sour. My shortstop didn't come through like we thought. My third baseman was hurt most of the time. My second baseman didn't come up to expectation, end quote. Another likely reason for the 1960 Giants' failure was the relative youth of the team. While Sheehan was the oldest rookie manager in history, the Giants were the youngest big league team in 1960, averaging just 26.8 years old. Whatever the reasons, and there were several, the Giants finished in 5th place, 16 games behind the Pirates. In his autobiography, My Ups and Downs in Baseball, Cepeda wrote, quote, Sheehan managed well enough, but it was clear he was only an interim manager, and many players do not bear down in such a situation where the man in charge is on a here today, gone tomorrow basis. Tom Sheehan was a man who knew his baseball and treated me with unfailing kindness and respect. In mid-October, Sheehan and the Giants embarked on a month-long exhibition tour of Japan. When the traveling party reached Tokyo on October 20th, Stoneham announced that Sheehan would return to his previous role as chief scout in 1961. Alvin Dark was named the next Giants manager on October 31st. Back in his old job as troubleshooter and chief scout, Sheehan allowed that the 1960 season had been difficult. Quote, I accepted the interim job out of friendship to Horace. Anyway, I'm glad it's over. At 66, I'm no kid anymore. Managing the Giants was slowly driving me nuts, end quote. The young, underperforming Giants of 1960 matured into a very good team in 1962 and won the National League pennant under Dark. As in 51, 52, and 54, Sheehan was praised for his scouting reports on the 1962 World Series opposition. Sheehan and Stoneham spoke openly of their friendship over the years, and they often socialized together. It was a relationship their critics exploited. In 1965, Bill Veeck wrote, "Horace Stoneham has two occupations in life. He owns the San Francisco Giants and he drinks." Veeck belittled Sheehan's role as, quote, boon companion and chief watering scout, end quote. In a scathing 1960 Sports Illustrated profile of Stoneham and Sheehan, Roy Terrell described the 1960 club as an assemblage of racial and ethnic cliques, quote, contemptuous of their manager, Tom Sheehan, whom they consider an old clown, end quote. In fact, the divided clubhouse may have been a driving reason for naming Sheehan manager. San Francisco Chronicle sports writer Charles R. McCabe argued that Sheehan was likely chosen because of his, quote, widely recognized ability to get along with the Negro players, elicit their confidence, and to get work of high caliber out of them, end quote. Sheehan had a long history of respecting Black and Latino players. While playing in Atlanta, he attended Black Crackers games, and during his 5 seasons in Kansas City, he watched the Monarchs, one of the Negro League's premier teams. Sheehan once said that if their star pitcher, Bullet Joe Rogan, was pitching in the major leagues, he'd never lose. Sheehan competed against Rogan and other Negro League stars in off-season exhibitions during the 20s and 30s when he lived in Los Angeles. And of course, there is ample evidence of mutual respect between Mays, Alou, Cepeda, Marichal, and Sheehan from the 1950s to the present day. Consider these words from Orlando Cepeda in his other autobiography, Baby Bull. Quote, I love Tom Sheehan. Tom had been in my corner from day one. No one in the organization had more faith in me or cared about me more, end quote. Juan Marichal told me in 2014 that Sheehan was one of the best men he had ever known in baseball, saying, quote, he was so kind and so funny. He was my first big league manager and he treated me very good. Sheehan remained vibrant and involved with the Giants into his 80s. His tenure with the team, which began on that night at the Stevens Hotel in 1945, finally ended in 1976 when Stoneham sold the club to Bob Lurie. When Sheehan's health declined, he relocated to Chillicothe, Ohio with his second wife, Dottie, to be near her family. Thomas Clancy Sheehan died childless at the age of 88 on October 29th, 1982. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much. I'm happy to take any questions.
Tom, that was wonderful. Can you just give up the screen now?
Yep. How do I do that?
That was great. Tom, that was fabulous. And I'm sure a lot of us never saw many of those pictures before. You did a great job honoring your great uncle.
Thank you.
And I had no idea he was this involved with everything. So, all right, we will open it up to questions. We'll go with Steve and then Bill. Steve?
Tom, that was a terrific presentation. I don't think any of us knew a lot of the information that you researched. I mean, you did a lot of legwork there. I have a question because Ed Logan is on tonight, who was their bat boy in '57. The first picture you showed of Rigney, and there was a young man next to him on his left. I'm pretty sure that was Ed. So I don't know if Ed saw it, or if you can take a look at that photo, the first one. If you can't do it, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share it.
I think it was the first one you showed.
That
Rigney
color
was
picture?
on the bench. It was when you introduced Rigney as the manager in 1956 and 57, replacing DeRocha.
Yeah.
If it's a big deal, let it go. It's not important.
Well, I just don't have sharing capability. Well,
Okay, so
Actually, you do. You could just take it again if you want.
Okay, sure.
because I have a lot of pictures and Ed's given me a lot. That one I've never seen.
This one, is it
There
this
it is,
one?
right
Yeah.
there. Ed, is that you?
In this window,
Um,
the tool has been enabled.
Ed
this is
Logan, are you still there?
57
Is
or
that
56?
the Hello,
If
Ed
That
Lowe.
picture's 1960.
Oh, yeah, it
Yes.
wouldn't be me. No, not 60.
What was that? That
Hello?
looks just like you as a young kid, right? I mean, it was,
That looks like,
No,
think it's the
I'm on the
catch me.
webinar, the old timers game.
is that Brussoud, Eddie
Today.
Brussoud?
I don't know. It's not McKercher.
It's
What
not
year was that?
McKercher?
19?
I thought it was McKercher.
No, it's not McKercher.
It's not McKercher, no.
All right, it's a lot of other, I thought it was you and I said, gee, I never saw
Yeah, I
that.
appreciate that, but no, I was in college at that time.
Are we sure it's 1960? Is that?
Yeah, that picture shows up in a 1960 Sports Illustrated article.
No.
Okay,
Like,
let it go.
Wind Blows and Candlestick, I believe.
Yeah,
Okay. No problem.
yeah.
Really, really great.
Wonderful.
Tom, great photos. They were fabulous. Bill,
Oh,
you're
thank
up.
you.
Thank you very much, Tom. I'm a 1960 Giants fan. I saw the first game at the park there, and it's with my folks. And it was a lousy season, but I think Tom did the best that he could on that. The highlight of that season, let's face it, it's Marichal. It's the one hitter. I didn't realize he came up on the 10th, but he didn't actually pitch until the 19th. Do you have any indication from your research? That's not me. Why they held him back that long on that?
Offhand, I don't. I would have to go through my clippings and so forth. I wasn't aware that it was that long off the top of my head, but
Did Tom scout Juan down at Tacoma? I know Juan pitched, I believe, in the All-Star game that year in Tacoma, and I didn't know if Tom had scouted him and made the recommendation to bring him up prior to his being named manager. I didn't know what if there was any relationship on that.
yeah, I'm not sure about that. When he was a scout, it's kind of hit and miss what newspaper articles tell you about his activities. So I don't recall seeing anything like that, but in his job, I know that he was going around to all of the Giants affiliates and checking up on prospects. So he was certainly aware of them.
Okay, thank you much. I appreciate it. The final thing I'll leave you with, you kind of alluded to it, the loose clubhouse there in 1960. The motto I've heard of the Giants that year was "Shut up and deal." So I think that might have been it. It was a pretty loose, not just clubhouse, obviously, but post-game hotel situation. But shut up and deal.
Right. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Tom, I had a quick question for you. Stoneham is regarded as one of the leaders in the Latino movement. So your great uncle would have been like the lead guy with that, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So he physically went down. Do you know? Your information is so he went down to scout these guys.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he was there all the time, at least every year from like 1950 on. And in fact, after I first started researching Sheehan, my grandmother, who was married to Tom Sheehan's nephew, told me she had some of his things and went into her basement and found 2 of his personal scrapbooks for me, which I have. And included in those scrapbooks are clippings from newspapers in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic.
Now, when you started this, did you have any idea what you were getting involved in? That he was this influential in Giant history?
No, not really. I mean, because Sheehan moved away and because my mom moved away, my mom left Illinois when she was 19 to go to college and moved to Denver. So we would go back occasionally for family visits. But, I just remember my grandfather telling me that he was a Giant scout and was a great minor league pitcher and a bad major league pitcher. And that's really all I knew. And then, I would see things occasionally in books about him, but one of my frustrations was it seemed to be the same paragraph in every book, about how he was unqualified and he was a drinking buddy of Stoneham's. So actually what led to the research was I had a desk job and in a lot of downtime, I started looking at eBay for baseball memorabilia and had been to a St. Paul Saints game with my wife and looked to see what they had from the Saints. And I have this right here. This was a baseball card that was issued in 1978 of Tom Sheehan in a Saints jersey. I didn't even know he had played for the Saints. And on the back of this card, it's got a great little story about him and talks about the year he won 31 games. And so then I was like, holy cow, there's stuff out there. At least I had a place to start. And the internet, this was like 2002. So the internet was getting going pretty well. And I just started digging. And as I've been researching, more and more has come online. So
It's great. I mean, I don't know about any, I'm not telling you to write a book, but this could be a book, I think. I don't know.
Thanks. That's kind of my goal at the end of all this is to do that.
Terrific. All right, we're going to go to Robert Kamarowski, then Andy, Paul, and Dan. Robert, you're up. Robert, you have to unmute.
Hi, Bob.
All right, I guess he's not unmuting. Andy, you're up. Andy, unmute.
Unmute. Okay,
There we
now I'm
go.
good. Now I'm good?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great. Tom, just fantastic research. I love hearing about how teams clinch the pennant. And do you have any more information? And if you don't, I did a little research when Tom came in that 1925 clincher. I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I know that. You mean as far as how they clinched it, the final out?
Yeah, he did a great job. If I looked it up while you were talking. Sorry.
Yeah, he really did well as a reliever for the Pirates. And when he was sold to Kansas City, there are articles quoting the manager, just praising what a great guy he was and that he was in a tough role as a reliever and handled it really well. The way that they won that game, there was a runner on third. I'm not sure if there were other runners on, but it was a fly ball to left field and 1 out. And I can't remember who the left fielder was, but he made the out and threw the ball home, and they doubled up the guy trying to score. So that sent them into the World Series, which they won against the Senators.
That's right. That's about right. And then, wow, that's a link, because I agree with Gary. There's a book. This man was involved in a lot of history. When you think of the 1915 A's, how bad they were, that's because Connie Mack, that was the first time he broke up the team. Great team, by the way. And look what's happening now to Washington.
Right.
You know, it's a sad state in baseball, but the A's so great. And then at 15, after winning the pennant in 14, so bad. Thank you for a great presentation.
You bet. Thank you. And one more thing about the Philadelphia time, Sheehan, when he was 1-16, his ERA was like 3.6, and his roommate neighbor's ERA was even better, even though he was 1-20. It was like an ERA of 3.47. So that shows how inept they were offensively.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. You're up, Paul.
Yeah, Tom, thank you very much. That was really terrific. I wanted to just follow up on something Gary had talked about. We've been discussing over the last year or two about the role Stoneham played in getting Latin American ball players. Was he the guy who initiated this? Was he the leader in this, or were there other people like your great uncle that was doing this? I mean, who deserves the most credit for going after these ball players that we've come to know so well?
That's a good question. They weren't the first, certainly, you look at Minnie Minoso, was already up. So I think they knew that it was an opportunity. And there's a great article that I found that I can forward to everybody that kind of goes into detail about the Giants' pursuit of Latin talent. I don't have it handy right now, but I'd be happy to forward that along.
That'd be great.
And one thing about that, and it's something that goes on to this day, is that Latin America was seen as not just a hotbed of talent, but a way to acquire talent cheap. And so that's one of the things about it, is that there's quite a bit of exploitation there. They knew that they could get talent from third world countries much cheaper than in America. And that's something that still goes on today, where these ball players are exploited.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
But certainly the Giants were at the forefront.
Great, Dana, you're up.
Thanks, Gary. Tom, that was a really interesting presentation. I've done a lot of research about the Giants in the 60s and 70s, and usually when Sheehan's name comes up, it is not in a complimentary manner, but it's almost like he's a stick figure. They just mention the name. He managed very shortly. He didn't do well. Players didn't like him, blah, 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 blah. And then he just disappears off the stage. So it was actually just nice to get a sense of like, there's a person behind all this, and get like, he wasn't just some guy who stumbled into a baseball job. And I think you did a good job of explaining that. I also think your story is actually a really good microcosm of a lot of the reasons that Horace Stoneham deserves consideration for the Hall of Fame, and then some reasons that he's not really Hall of Fame worthy, just because of the way, like, a really great owner probably would not handle this situation that well. Like, hey, do you want to manage? Here it is, pretty much. But anyway, that's a story for another day. Since you're continuing this research, I live in San Francisco. So if you want to reach out to Gary and get my contact info, there might be some files here in the library here that I could access that you might not be able to remotely. I don't know where you live, but I don't think you live in San Francisco. So reach out to Gary if you want. And my question, and I do have one, is unfortunately my Zoom crashed near the end of your presentation, so I had to spend time reloading. And I didn't hear too much about how did he deal with retirement. And if you covered this, just say you covered it, and I'll rewatch the presentation. But I'm always kind of curious how a baseball lifer deals with not working and, confronting the void. Do you have any insight on how that went for him?
Well, it was a very short retirement because he worked until 1976 when he was 82, and he died in 1982. I don't know the dates exactly offhand, but I think by 1980 he had moved back to Ohio with his wife because his health was failing and he was dealing with dementia. So, one thing about Sheehan is he was an avid golfer his entire life. From the 20s on, he was a fantastic golfer. It's one of the reasons he lived in LA. And if he wasn't playing baseball, he was golfing. So I would imagine that continued until he physically wasn't able.
Well, that's a good way to spend your time. Those are two good things to occupy your time with.
That's right. Thank you very much. I will be in touch.
Sure. Okay.
I have no idea how old you are. Did you get to talk to him like as a young boy, or?
No, well, I only remember meeting him once at a family reunion because I was born in 1967. So at that point, he was 73 years old. So when I met him, it was probably around 1980. Or no, it would have been earlier than that. It would have been like 78. So I was like 10 or 11. And, I was introduced to him. My name is Thomas Sheehan Flynn. And I'm not exactly named after him. I have the middle name of Sheehan because it's a family name that my mom liked. But, all the family was saying, oh, come meet the man you're named after. You guys have the same name. So it was a very short conversation.
Anybody else who had a question for Tom? Tom, really fabulous. I think everybody here is very surprised that they learned so much tonight about how little we did know prior to this. So this was a fabulous meeting, and really, if you don't write a book, maybe you could do some kind of paper for Saber if you're involved with that or something.
Yeah, that's the next thing I have going is I'm doing his Saber bio, which I'll be turning in probably in October. And I've also written a chapter about the game when he took over as manager for an upcoming Candlestick book that's being edited by Lincoln Mitchell.
That's why
Lincoln has been on here quite often. So
Yeah.
Tom, when that thing does get published, I know some of the Sabre people who write don't like their stuff sent, but I hope you would share that with the group here because they were.
Oh, yeah.
They really enjoyed this. So.
Sure.
Guys,
Thanks so
give it
much.
up for Tom Flynn.
Yay.
Thanks. Oh, one more thing. I was lucky that my grandfather, Sheehan's nephew, as I mentioned, Sheehan was childless. My grandpa was, I think, his favorite nephew, and he left him his 1954 World Series ring. And I was lucky enough to get it in my grandfather's will. So I have a 1954 World Series ring.
Great. Good for you.
I know this crowd would love. So.
Guys, thanks so much. We will see each other next week. I will hang in the room if anybody wants to talk about the present day Giants. But Tom, thanks. Fabulous.
That was terrific.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Have a great night, everybody.
okay.
There are just no words.